Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, some of you may find this surprising. Others may not be so surprised. About 52% of recent college graduates are working jobs that do not require a degree. And this is what's referred to as underemployment. And for those who find themselves underemployed after graduation, it can be difficult to get career earnings back on track. In fact, after a decade, 45% of graduates are still stuck in jobs that do not require college, according to a report by the Burning Glass Institute and the Strata Education Foundation that looked at data related to educational attainment, employment, and career trajectories of more than 60 million workers. Perhaps that is why there seems to be a growing chorus of people questioning whether or not the high cost of college is worth it. Our next guest says it is worth it. Jim Keyes is the former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Education is Freedom Foundation. His new book is Education is Freedom. The future is in your hands. He is here with us in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Jim, so great to have you here with us. We did a little bit of a setup because I feel like there's so much of a debate that's out there when it comes to education. Your own experience with education, how important was it to you to where you got ultimately?
It was critically important, and I can't stress enough that education is such a fundamental unlocking opportunity, not just jobs. But the name of the book is literally Education is Freedom. It's really about freedom. It's about the ability to move from role to role, from career to career if you choose, or even just to have a more fulfilled life. The more you learn, the more you can do. You
don't think anything in terms of education, because it's interesting, we've had a lot of conversations in the newsroom, your book and just in general about this space, about when I started out, an undergraduate did open a lot of doors for me, but I didn't need a master's or anything. I was just doing it. Today it feels like I hear from my own daughter, she's like, Mom, I've done the undergraduate, but I'm going to need a master's to go on. Is there a balance, though, between going out and doing it versus just kind of continuing on with education? Help me out here.
There is. In fact, most business schools encourage you to get a couple of years of experience before going back. It helps you when you get back into graduate school to be able to have had that real life experience. But fundamentally, those tools that you get, the more you enrich the bag of tools that you have, the more you can do. And so it's all about flexibility and opportunity.
What about, though, when we say stats, like I talked in the introduction, forgive me, I was kind of running through them because I wanted to get to you. Yeah. But you have college graduates who are feeling like they're stuck in a job that doesn't require a college education. And it feels like that's a pretty significant number. We're talking about 45%. So what's your take on something like that? It's one data point, I know.
Yeah, I just had to respond to an article that was in the Wall Street Journal recently about Walmart not requiring a college degree anymore for certain jobs. But you've got to remember, we're in a unique bubble right now with 3.5% unemployment, and there are a lot of jobs out there that don't require a college degree that are very well-paying jobs. The question is, where will we be when we have 7-8% unemployment? Because, of course, these things are cycles, and it will happen at some point in the future. And that degree will help you differentiate yourself. Think of it as your brand. At some point, you're going to have to raise money. You're going to have to apply for a job. And not having that degree will make it difficult to compete with others who do.
All right. So then how do you... You know the stories about the amount of student debt that's out there, and kids who've gotten college degrees, they're indebted, and it's taking them years to pay it back because they haven't gotten necessarily a job that has made it easy to manage that debt.
Well, I'm going to give you a classic business example.
Yeah.
You would never invest in a company based on today's returns. You basically run a net present value of future earning streams and discount it back for today's dollars. And if you look at, I'm not sure why we don't look at college as an investment in ourselves, because it's not going to pay back in today's dollars, but it will pay back over time if you look at all of the statistics about having a degree versus not having a degree. Now, this doesn't hold for every degree that you get or every job that you have, but on balance, that degree does give you far more earning power over your life. And here's the way I like to look at it. Getting a college degree is an investment in yourself that pays dividends for the rest of your life.
Right.
So think of it as a business investment in yourself.
It's interesting because you are so all in on education.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting when you've got schools now that are $60, $70, $80, $90,000 a year that automatically make it kind of problematic for some people to afford them. And that, again, they have to, tack on a pile of debt that doesn't go away so easily.
I had to address the same thing because I've had people, now I'm out there on social media, I've got kids going, yeah, it's easy for you to say, boomer, you had it easy. College was cheap. So I ran the numbers, and when I graduated from college, my tuition was $7,500 a year. In today's dollars, it's $55,000 a year. So yes, it's a little bit more today, but not extraordinarily higher. And this is a really important point. Endowments have been massively improved today versus 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And college discount rates, this is a really important factor that no one takes into consideration, are as high as 45, 50, sometimes 60% discount rate. In other words, the amount of scholarship money that they provide. So beware being intimidated by the sticker price, because the actual price may be significantly less.
The thing I will say about scholarships, having gone through the college route with my own daughter, in that there's not a ton of academic scholarships anymore. There's a lot on the sports side of things. And then there's a lot on, depending on your economic well-being or not so well-being, that, and I'm so glad it's there, for that. But there's a lot of people in the middle that kind of get stuck with that debt load.
There is. The middle is tough, and it's always been tough. And I guess if you look back at history, this is not unique to today. We've always had that challenge of the kids that really can't afford it are in a much better position to get scholarships. The kids who can't afford it almost doesn't matter, is that middle group that are challenged. But again, I can't stress enough, from two perspectives. From the individual's perspective, right, it's critically important to differentiate yourself down the road and make that investment. But for a corporation, you remember from my bio, I ran 2 Fortune 500 companies.
Right. We
had a hard time employing an educated workforce at that store manager level. And that's even more challenging today with 3.5% unemployment. So if we're going to be competitive, if our corporations are going to be competitive 20, 30, 40 years from now, we better step up and recognize the importance.
We'll go there, because I do feel like before the pandemic, and very much so after the pandemic, the role of the corporation in kind of taking care of employees. What do you think should be the role of employers when it comes to helping to educate their workforce?
Here's the way I look at it. It's a classic, I can't help but turn everything into a classic business problem. It's supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
We're the demand. Businesses are the demand for an educated workforce. And yet we very rarely make the investment in that education. It's state and local government that trains public school kids. And so today, my recommendation in the book, it's a bit of a call to action to corporations to see the need for investing. And how do we do that? Through technology. We've got such an opportunity to transform education with things like AI.
How we do it?
Yeah, digital learning. There's so much opportunity, but that's not going to happen at a state and local government level.
So who needs to do it? The companies?
I think corporations should, and ultimately I think they will, once they realize that this supply and demand problem is a problem.
Are you surprised it hasn't moved along post-pandemic, where I really thought everybody, okay, we got it, this technology, we can do it. Look at how we all worked from home. I feel like the educational space has lagged in terms of embracing technology more effectively.
It has, but you know what? It's a bit misleading, because I think COVID actually helped accelerate by maybe 10 or 20 years.
Right.
Because if you think about the lack of just fundamental Wi-Fi hotspots, lack of access to laptops with kids, companies like AT&T, IBM, Dell, Apple all stepped up. And now there's a massive improvement in at least availability.
All right, let's get back to our guest. With us is Jim Keyes. He is the former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Education is Freedom Foundation. His new book is Education is Freedom. The future is in your hands, and he's still with us in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. I'm going to kind of go back to some of the stuff you and I were just talking about on air. Peter Thiel, who has said, you don't have to go to college. You're wrong.
It's
If Peter was here right now, what would you say to him?
I would say, please stop. And here's why. If you give a young person an excuse and say, you don't need to go to college, they're going to take it. They're going to take it. So just step back from this and think about global competitiveness. The United States, since about 2012, 2015, has gone from high 50s in post-secondary graduation rates down to 40. Now, COVID contributed to that decline, but we're going in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, China has gone exactly opposite. They have gone from the 40% range up to nearly 60 and climbing. They're doubling down on the importance of an educated populace and an educated workforce. And this issue is critically important to corporate America if we dial forward, and our ability to sustain competitiveness will depend on an educated workforce. Demand for the supply that is lagging right now.
What's the answer? And I think about, I'm one of 7 kids, and my parents, it was all about getting a college education. That was so important. My dad came out of World War II, a GI Bill, went to this was from the get-go, you can do whatever you want after you go to college, was kind of the mission here. How have we gotten away from it in your view? And how is it when there is so much education, but we see our public education, it feels like failing us nonstop here?
Yeah, we're in this weird bubble of the availability of technology, but not the application of technology. And some of it comes down to how are we funded? State and local governments, the challenges of that.
Because we spend a lot of money.
We are spending a lot of money, but we can spend it far more efficiently. I don't think the solution will happen leaving it up to state and local governments. I hope that corporations will see that they are ultimately the demand and want to step up, because the technology is available today to completely transform the way we teach and the way we learn. We saw you and I were talking about, during COVID.
During the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, during the pandemic.
Wasn't so great for some.
It wasn't so great for some, but here's what happened. It was a massive improvement in the availability and access that wasn't there, particularly for the underprivileged. It's there now. What we haven't done is integrated those platforms, upgraded the user content to make it eye-popping. So those kids that were hating their online class would then play video games for 4 or 5 hours, right?
Right, so
you can make school just as engaging. That's the challenge, and that will come. That's our next step.
But do we have to be careful about technology? Yay, great, right, Jim? But I also think about the importance of part of school is social skills, learning to communicate. Like
exactly.
What's the balance here?
Well, and you just made my point. That's why a formal education still is and will be important for quite some time, because it's more than just learning. You can learn online virtually anything.
Right.
But it's those meta skills.
Right?
Yeah. But it's those meta skills. It's those soft skills that I've outlined in the book, things like curiosity, creativity, critical thinking. Those skills are things that you hone in a classroom working with others.
If there's one thing you could change, or one step that you think, and I'm assuming it sounds like what you're saying is it's on the side of corporations to really step up here, what would be the step that the world needs to take to improve this?
Well, the first step, I think, is we've got to get beyond fear, because I think fear is the big culprit here.
You write about that in the book.
I've got a whole chapter on fear and a chapter on confidence, because confidence is so important for learning,
right,
and preparation. But fear is the killer, because we're afraid of so much. Some of us are afraid of teachers' unions. We're afraid that kids are being indoctrinated. We're afraid of, this and that and this and that, all these horrible things that are buzzing around, and it's contributing to this narrative that maybe you don't even need school. Huh. Well, if we can reverse that fear, and you think about the antidote to fear, it's knowledge. So if we can reverse the fear, replace it with knowledge and understanding and confidence, then I believe that will help us recognize the opportunity, because we are there right on the cusp of being able to completely transform the way we teach and learn.
If we don't do this, what do you think is the outcome or the impact on our country?
I am concerned both for our corporations and global competitiveness of America, but also for the country itself, all the way back to Jefferson.
Yeah.
Alexis de Tocqueville came from France and said, with Jefferson, that the sustainability of a democracy depends on an educated populace.
And you get into this whole idea of the polarization that we see. You believe that this is going to be the way that we get rid of some of that, right? And
I do. I believe it's ultimately the solution because so much of this polarization is fear. And going back to FDR's indoctrination speech, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, right? And we are in the grips of fear, and it's just taking us down. It's just distracting us from so much potential to move forward as a people.
I'd be remiss, and we have about 3.5 minutes left, to not talk about your background. It's an incredible background, as we said, at Blockbuster, former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. You came into both of those at difficult times. Blockbuster, that was in July of 2007, I believe you took over.
Yes.
And then 7-Eleven, I think it was just before, was it the great financial crisis?
Yes, just before I arrived there in 85, and then the world fell apart in 87.
Actually, the market crashed in 87. Forgive
Right.
me. Well, your timing is impeccable.
Oh, yeah.
But what did,
Lucky me.
Really, really tough times. What did both of those times teach you? How did education help you through it?
There's an important message I have in the book, and it's a whole chapter on change. And I've coined the expression change equals opportunity, which is ironically the acronym for CEO.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
and
it's funny.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the role of a CEO is to not shrink from change, because change is inevitable. And you're right, I lived through 2 major financial disasters. And one, we came out the other side at 7-Eleven and ended up with a great result. And at Blockbuster, unfortunately, perhaps I got there too late, but we couldn't turn it around in time.
Right.
We did, though, successfully take the company through a restructuring and sold it to Dish Networks, which was far better than the alternative of a total liquidation, which could have happened during those times. We had $1 billion on the balance sheet. But there's so many lessons in that change can be opportunity. It's not the change itself, it's how you respond to the change.
Did you feel like that, though, when you were in the midst of it?
Heck no, I'm normal. I thought, why me? Why do I have to deal with this?
I mean, really, really difficult. And I think about something like Blockbuster. I mean, we talk about it, there's generations that don't even know, right? But how important that was kind of to all of us. I don't know. When you look at your time at both of those companies and you look at kind of where the world is today, are there trends today that you just find totally fascinating? Like, I'm thinking about content and how we stream content and how much that has come along.
Oh, absolutely. Right now we're in one of those almost similar periods. There are people trying to run a company that borrowed money at 3%, and now they're having to pay 7, 8, 9%, right? And it's all about learning, and that's really my motive in the book, to be able to share many, many years of learning through experience and share it with others, to not be afraid of change, because change ultimately is going to happen. It's at the core of all commerce.
You're right. It's constantly coming at us. We know it. It happened in ours. It happens daily in a program that we do, where just something happens and we've got to kind of adapt. How do you hope people use this? Just got about 30 seconds left here. Your book.
Well, my first objective is to have people read it, and I think it's applicable. If you're young, it'll help you in school. If you're older, it'll help you just with life, to be able to have a fuller life. It's common sense stuff, just a reminder of the basics of how to learn, why to learn, those kinds of things. But what I really hope people will do is see this as an opportunity to give this book to someone who needs it, because we all know those people that are kind of lost. They don't know what to do. Should I go to school?
Yeah.
Should I not?
Yeah.
Should I change careers? I think it's a great gift book for those who need a little bit of encouragement to realize the opportunity is in their hands, literally.
Love it. And I like you and I were talking off air. I feel like education is one of those things that needs to continue to be disrupted and make it more accessible to a lot more people. Jim Keese, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great stuff. New book is Education is Freedom. The Future is in Your Hands. Of course, the former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven.